Harold's Fairy Tale by Crockett Johnson. One evening, Harold got out of bed, took his purple crayon, and went along. Went for a walk in an enchanted garden. Nothing grew on it. If he hadn't known it was an enchanted garden, Harold scarcely would have caught in a garden at all. To find out what the trouble was, Harold decided to ask the king. Kings live in large castles. Harold had to make sure the castle was big enough to be the king's. He didn't want to waste time talking to princesses or earls or dukes. This was a king's castle, all right. It had tall towers, bigger, and a big drawgate to keep out people the king didn't want to see. But when the drawgate was drawn close, it kicked Harold out too. Harold shouted for the king to come down. I'll let him in, but the gate didn't open. He walked along the edge of an enchanted garden, beside the smooth wall of the castle, until he thought of his purple crayon. A person smaller than a very small mouse would be able to get in. Without even batting, he walked into a very small mouse hole. He walked through the mouse hole into the castle. He invited the mouse into, but the mouse preferred to stay the outside. As he gazed around inside the big castle, Harold felt very tiny. And the king might not pay much attention to anybody who was smaller than a mouse. So Harold used his purple crayon again. He made sure he was as tall as 4 and a half steps of stairs. His usual height. Then he climbed up the stairs, looking for the king. He went up and up and up until he got so tired he couldn't climb another step. Luckily, there were no more steps. He had reached the top. He still couldn't find the king, but he remembered kings sat on thrones. The king's throne looked very comfortable. Harold thought the kings wouldn't mind if he rested a few minutes. He sat on the throne, wondering what it was like to be a king and wearing a crown. So tried it with the king's crown. It was all right for a while, but the crown began to feel heavy. So Harold put it on the king's head. As he thanked the king for the loan of the crown, he noticed that the king looked sad, no doubt because of the garden. He asked the king if he traveled he did to the witch or a giant. The king couldn't say which. He looked sad and helpless, intendedly the giant or witch. If the king couldn't tell which it was invisible, but Harold told the king not to worry. And he set off, find his invisible witch or giant. Brandishing his purple crayon, it made a hole in the wall. The accident embarrassed Harold, but the hole was the handiest way out of the castle, and he climbed through it. When he looked down from the upper side of the king, he realized he had forgotten how high up he was. He needed something tall to climb down on, something as tall as a steeple. To fill the hole in the castle, Harold put a handsome and useful clock on it. He was surprised to see how late it was, so slid down the stable to find the invisible witch or giants right away. It wasn't a staple, it was a pointed hat. It was a giant witch. The Purple Crayon made a plan. It was an invisible giant witch. Well, no wonder nothing grew in the enchanted garden. Could anything grow? Harold said to himself, with a giant witch tramping around with big feet. Now that he saw what the trouble was, all Harold had to do was drive the witch out of the enchanted garden. Mosquitoes, Harold knew will drive anybody out of a garden. The mosquitoes drove out the witch. They also were driving Harold out of the garden. He had to make smoke to get rid of the mosquitoes. If he had once heard somebody say that where there's smoke, it must be fire to put out the fire. He first thought of fire engines, but he decided to make it rain. Rain was easier. The rain soaked everything. Harold too, but he said it's good for the flowers. He was right. Soon there were flowers. Beautiful flowers popped up all over the enchanted garden, more than Harold was able to count. All in a good joyous bloom. Harold thought he delighted and happy the king would be when he looked out for the castle in the morning. And then amazingly, the last flower turned out to be not a flower at all, but a lovely fairy. She had out her magic wands at fairies, always to win there, giving somebody wishes that will come true. Harold couldn't think of the king to wish for, but to be polite. He took one wish and took the fairy. He'd use it later. Besides, Harold thought as he started on his long walk home, a wish might come in handy sometime. After all the excitement, he suddenly felt tired as he supposed did, and he stopped to rest a while. He sat on a small rug because the ground was still somewhat damp for the rain, and he wished. He wished the rug was a flying carpet. At once, Harold felt it rise in the air. It flew fast and high. But when it went so fast, it left the moon behind. Harold realized he didn't know how to stop the carpet or even slow it down. He wished he'd taken 2 wishes from the fairy so he could wish the flying carpet around a woodland. But he didn't have this purple crayon. He landed the flying carpet in this living room behind the high back chair his mother sat in. And he asked her to read him a story before he went back to bed. The end.